Is this going to be amplified up there? Or do I need to grab a mic to tell everybody to filter in?
Oh, no, I can just yell. Right, this is not amplified. No, but you could use one of these. That's plugged in up there. So would this interfere with this? No. Okay.
Test. All right, everybody. Can I have it quiet for just a second?
I'll do it also because I need to make an announcement about the food and that.
Okay.
Hello, everybody! Yeah, y'all can hear that, right? And a hush hello to the crowd. Thank you. Come on in, talk to me. We'll sit in the upper area. Standing room, but no two concert space.
Yes, just wait. I'll get you.
Welcome to Godly Headquarters. My name is Rebecca. I'm the doctor of this here. We're not me. First, we will eat after the program. However, there is a cooler with drinks in it available for you all now. Water, soda, tea, cool. Bathrooms against the back wall. So there are two openings that go into our hallway back here. One right next to the staircase, one further down next to the game machine. That's how you get to the bathroom. That's also how you exit. Everybody here. That's how you what? Exit. Exit. The reason why is we're filming. So we can't have anybody walking back and forth this way. Please exit the back. Take phone calls, walls, and that. Cool. All right, welcome down to headquarters.
Awesome. All right. Oh, hey. Sorry. I'll try to refrain from saying hi to people I haven't seen in a minute. First and foremost, welcome to Gauntlet AI headquarters, at least until we outgrow this one in a little bit. But we're super excited to have you all here. How many of you, for how many of you is it your first time at Gauntlet? All right, probably, I mean, you're lying, but other than the liars, probably 75%. So we're super excited to have everybody out. So I'm going to introduce what Gauntlet is a little bit and then spend more time on what we're going to be seeing tonight. And then I'm going to pass the mic over to Ash, who is going to talk a little bit more about Gauntlet and some of the details of what Gauntlet is and why all of this craziness exists. But I think zooming out, what really matters is I think we are at a unique time in human history. When we, as crazy as it sounds, we didn't even have the idea for Gauntlet a year ago today. It was not a thing. We were just a little company training engineers to use AI a little bit. It was all B2B. None of you probably ever would have heard about it. But when we saw what was happening when you combine engineering and AI, it was clear to us, it was clear to the companies we were working with, and we saw a little bit earlier than most people the very early cutting edge of what happens when you get really, really good at AI, and it changes everything. We think that AI is a fundamentally unique, perhaps the greatest force multiplier for human talent that has ever existed. And when that's true, the missing piece becomes human talent. And so Gauntlet AI exists to fill that gap. We have a couple of different offerings and different sides of our company, which Ash will get into. But tonight, we get to hear from 3 Gauntlet AI challengers. I guess champions, technically, sorry. Why do we say challengers and champions? Gauntlet AI is a program that anybody can apply to. We select a small handful of people. We fly them into Austin. We put them up in housing. We use the offices. We cater food 3 times a day, sometimes more than 3 times a day. And the goal is to focus purely and solely on making AI do what you want it to do, on using AI to give you the leverage to do things that humans wouldn't be able to do without AI. So we brought back 3 of our graduates. We call them champions. because in each week of Gauntlet, there's a challenge that you have to get through to move on to the next week. Once you complete once you get to the end of the Gauntlet, you become a champion. So we invited 3 champions back to talk about how they use AI, what their workflows look like. They're going to tell us all sorts of different tips and tricks. And I think, there are very few people on the planet who have used AI more or with more effect than the 3 people that you'll see tonight. So we're really, really excited to see that. And with that, I'm going to hand the mic over to Ash to describe a little bit more about why all of this craziness exists and why we're all here, and then we'll dive right into it.
All right. So with the show of hands, who's used an AI coding tool before? Okay. Who's used Claude Code, Cursor, some other tool? Okay. The reason why we created this event is because at Gauntlet, we believe in something called an AI-first coding methodology. We think this is unique to every single developer because the way you context engineer or the way you put your prompts together and understand your code base is different for everybody. So what's the point of this event? The point of this event is to showcase stitching together different applications, how they're thinking through their context, and how they're deciding what to say to these coding agents for them to be able to generate code properly. At Gauntlet, in both of our programs, the Gauntlet main flagship and the Catalyst program, we start by defining your AI-first coding methodology. If you're unable to understand how to code with AI, then you're not going to be able to get that force multiplier that Austin was talking about. The goal here is not to have the same methodology across every single individual, but rather spend 1,000 hours honing in on your methodology and deciding what is the perfect workflow for what you're trying to do. It might be a different coding language. It might be a different tech stack. It might be a whole different scenario based on the circumstances that you have. But the goal is, can I refine my methodology to a point where it's able to be so effective in my environment that I'm able to ship much faster? So in this scenario, my goal is to first define what is AI-first coding. At Gauntlet, we define it in 2 ways. It's coding with AI, but it's also building AI. So you'll notice that each one of our programs not only emphasizes on creating this methodology, rather also building AI systems like RAG pipelines, agents, multi-agent systems, fine-tuning mechanisms, and also reinforcement learning environments now, right? Every single time that we're trying to become an AI-first engineer, we're understanding, hey, this is the methodology by which I'm going to code, and this is the methodology by which I'm going to build. If we're able to then understand both of these areas, then we get a champion that you'll see today. Now, Austin talked about our flagship Gauntlet program, which is a 10-week intensive program where everyone's flown here into Austin, Texas, and they spend 100 hours a week building with AI and building AI. I wanted to introduce our new offering, which is called Catalyst. Now, this is, hey, I have a bunch of existing engineers at my company already. I don't need to go out and hire new people, but I need to give my existing engineers a skill set by which they can perform as well as a Gauntlet challenger. And that is what Catalyst aims to do. It's 3 weeks remote, where we build the same foundations, RAG pipelines, fine-tuning mechanisms, agents, multi-agent systems across various tool stacks. And then all of these individuals come in person to Austin, Texas, working on real projects for the business or the organization. So in our Gauntlet flagship, they're all fake projects, open source projects, projects from the hiring partner. But in our Catalyst program, all of our projects are real business ROI, needle-moving projects that I've worked with technical leadership at those companies on, and we've created projects directly to move the needle forward in those organizations. So I wanted to introduce that program before we sort of move forward and help some of you understand the things that we offer and why we are so focused on AI-first development. Now, this is also a community event, so I'll do one more thing. All the Gauntlet alumni in the audience, please raise your hand. So all the people that have questions, there is 10, 20, 25 alumni in the audience right now that you can ask for their experience, what they're using to code, and what they're learning about AI right now. And the awesome part about this is we have a Catalyst program running right now with over 7 organizations. So if you're in the Catalyst program, raise your hand. So if you want to talk about the Catalyst experience, we have those individuals. And if you want to talk about people's real Gauntlet experience, you can talk to them as well. All right, without further ado, I'm going to introduce our first champion, and we're going to walk through her coding methodology. This is Natalie Smith. Sorry. Huh?
Okay, thank you. Cool. All right. Hello, folks. Can everyone hear me? Okay, cool. So I'm going to talk to you guys about how I use my favorite programmatic tool, Cursor, to build enterprise-grade applications and build real value. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Natalie Smith. I was a graduate of Gauntlet Cohort 2, and now I'm out in the real world building things with AI. And I believe that enterprise-grade applications can be built with AI, especially with a human in the loop who knows what they're doing. So first of all, how many people in this audience have used Cursor before? Oh, everybody, good. Okay, so I won't spend too long talking about it. But it is an IDE that is kind of the Visual Studio Code paradigm, so it's very easy to onboard on, but it is much more than just Visual Studio Code. There are lots of components underneath it in the architecture that allow you to talk to agents and program with agentic tooling. However, the 3 that I really want us to focus on are the agents, the chats, and the rules. Agents are what they sound like. It's those LLMs that actually write your code, or agentic architectures with multiple models that can ingest your code, look at diffs, implement changes, and maybe manage your code changes for you. Then there is the chat, which is the way that you talk to them. So the chat interface is really how you use natural code to tell your agents to do something. And Cursor supports multiple concurrent chats ongoing at the same time, which means you have multiple agent instances changing your code. This is not sandboxed unless you use background agents, but keep that in mind. However, there is degradation of AI programming over chat length, and that's because of context management. These AI models don't really know anything. They've been trained, and they know how to give you predictive responses, but Cursor has to send them the context over every chat response. So I really recommend that when you see that degradation, that you start a new chat, or that you get into the right kind of flow so that it feeds you the responses that you want. And then there are rules. Rules are things that you define that tell your AI agent how to program. Oftentimes, these are natural language, but these can be as widespread or as granular as you want them to be. So it can be anything from don't use emojis in your responses, all the way to I want you to use Firebase, here are all the best practices for this, or give me Yoda quotes. So these are really free-flowing, but these take precedence over your individual chat messages in Cursor. But enough about Cursor. I will tell you how I use it to build things. So before I'm building anything, I research. At Gauntlet, we had this thing called a brain lift, which is basically a document that is your knowledge body for whatever you're building. You can build a demo as much as you want, but really you want to know where your app fits in the niche of the industry and what you are actually building. So I really recommend to do iterative, question-based researching with AI deep research tools. I like to use GPT-4o or GPT-5 to get started, and this is kind of how I do it. I'll pass it a paragraph of what I want, and I'll ask for a concept document. And generally, I'll ask it to include phase suggestions for how to roll out the application. I will ask it to define some user stories for me that I will iterate over with it. And then I'll ask it to ask me questions. And those questions will guide the fleshing out of whatever I'm trying to build. Generally, what I also do is I will feed the same prompt to multiple different AI tools. I'll use Grok, and I like Grok because it feeds me actual sources. I'll use Manus if I really want to learn about the industry that I'm trying to produce an app in. It produces a very nice comprehensive report. And I've also had good luck with Perplexity. But this concept document is the kind of baseboard, bedrock, and it is critical, in my opinion. Then, after that, you take your concept document and you design, architect, and generate a PRD, or a product requirement document. So you can use many different kinds of prompts to generate these documents. The way I like to do it is I like to create a PRD that is phased. So I'll do phase 1, which is the foundation, and this is, in essence, what needs to be built first. I don't know how many people have maybe worked with an app or tried to build an app and then months later realized, oh, maybe I should have built that other thing first. Yeah, I feel like a couple of people can empathize with that. This is getting rid of that. So take a lot of time to figure out what goes into each of these phases. And generally, each of these lines I like to call one feature. If you envision a traditional SDLC, you'll usually have developers make a PR one feature at a time. Each of these lines should be equivalent to that. Furthermore, they should be organized so that the first ones that get done lead to the next ones, and there's a flow. So that's what you should aim for. And then, once you have your PRD, you convert it to a checklist. I'm kind of standing on the shoulders of giants here, but I think everyone else should do that. If you find something that works for you, then use it. So shout out to Reese Harding and Parma Wenzel. I've used their workflows a lot for generating PRDs. But yeah. Then you've got a PRD, so what? You have a concept document, you know what you're doing, and you know how you're going to do it. How are you going to ensure that Cursor does it the way you want it to? So here is a code base that has had no cursor initialization, so I can show you how it works. It's actually my portfolio. And I'm going to use a cursor rule generating package from NPX. This is Mr. Zach Smith's package. But cursor rules can be generated in whatever way you want. You can define them. There are repositories on GitHub with good cursor rules. You should tailor them to your use case, because although an opinion may be popular, it might be wrong. But here you see how I use this package to select the specific cursor rules that I want. And what I'll do also is, as I'm developing the application, I will remove or add in new cursor rules files. These will bloat your context. Be very careful with how many of these you add in at a time. But yeah, here I am selecting some more front-end cursor rules because this application has a lot of modern React.js front-end parts, some back-end components, maybe some cursor rules about MCP servers. Does everyone know what MCP servers are? Oh, good. Okay, the audience is well known. So yeah, and then the cursor rules get added in, and I ensure that they're all relevant to whatever I'm doing. This Yoda code ending cursor rule is especially good because it allows you to figure out when your context window is over and when you need to start a new chat. So I encourage cursor rules that seem kind of nonsensical but work for managing AI agents. And then I use this thing that's called a memory bank. So half of my AI methodology is really fancy setup, but the memory bank is a set of specific files which are a living memory for your agent. There is the project brief, the project context, system patterns, the tech context, the active context, and your progress. This is a concept that I also got from Zach Smith that I've kind of tailored into something that works for me. Some people like to use different things for memory management, like Taskmaster. but I find that this is a really good addition to my specific workflow. I want to make a distinction between different sources of documentation for you and for your agent. Your code is only going to be as good as your agent knows about it or you know about it. So you need multiple different layers of documentation to translate into natural language the sheer volume of code that you are producing. I'm a traditional dev, and I generally don't like docs, so this isn't supernatural, but this is how I do it. So there's the memory bank, which I use in essence at the start of every chat to preload into the agent the context of whatever we're doing. Then there is documentation, which is meant for people. Documentation is what I use to keep track of what the code base is doing. So let's say that I have a certain design paradigm. I want it to have certain colors or style. I'll put it in documentation. And then there are docs. Docs are what the AI uses to keep track of what it's doing. I generally don't really touch these, but they're kind of mini PRDs that are feature-based that allow it to keep track of all the work that it's done. So this is kind of your living source of knowledge about your app. And then finally, you're off to the races and you're building. You ask it to build based on your PRD. You link your docs in when you think they're relevant to the context, and you go. There are a couple of other tools that I wanted to mention for AI-driven development. Something I really like about Cursor is that you can tailor the amount of AI intervention that you want. So there's tab completion, obviously. There are inline edits, but there's also code and documentation indexing. This is really good for enterprise-grade applications. So this allows you to inject and preload an external resource or repository into your agent. And then there are MCPs. And since a lot of you know what those are, I'll kind of glaze over it, but it is a predefined protocol or standard for agents to interact with external tools. I actually encourage you to build your own MCP if you find that there's a very niche need that any other MCP doesn't fill. I've done that before. I've linked some useful repositories down below, and I'll share this with anyone who wants it afterwards, so all of the resources will be available. And then I wanted to make a note on enterprise or legacy projects. That's all fine and dandy for greenfield projects, build projects, and they take a lot of specialized knowledge. So for that research phase, use tools like Devin, DeepWiki, or just use Cursor itself to go through all of the key functions and create documents in that living document body to explain to you what the existing code base is. And then during the architecture phase, you're not really creating the architecture. You're trying to understand an existing architecture and adapt your agent to it. So there are lots of tools for this. Some folks like repo prompt. I like to just use my agents with the highest context windows and spend a day just tracing out the architecture and making a diagram. And this is also where Cursor rules come really in handy. I would put the architecture in your Cursor rules. For documentation and dependency indexing, so for one of our projects, we had to build a game. And that game relied on documentation, which was pretty lengthy. So I wrote it in Godot. And what I did was I took the entire Godot documentation repository, which was fairly large, and I indexed it, and suddenly my model could write in Godot. So then after that, for your next, the same. You have your PRD. You tell your agent, implement phase 1, implement substep 1, implement subfeature 1, and you're off to the races. Please test your code. Please test your code. Unit test it. Just because it works on your computer doesn't mean it'll work everywhere. Write automated tests. Write tests with MCPs like Playwright. Write CI/CD. Use evaluators. So, for example, There are lots of observability and open telemetry tools that you can use live when you deploy your application to see how it's actually performing. I encourage you to use as many third-party observability and testing tools as you can, not necessarily for test-driven development, but once it's live. It'll help you really quantify the areas that you're missing. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed, and please ask me questions. Thank you. Any questions? Yeah, go for it.
Hi, Natalie. Hey, I was wondering, so with memory banking,
Yes.
are you specifically telling the AI to build its own memory bank, or are you going in there yourself and making sure that it's staying focused on the task at hand instead of hallucinating?
No, it builds its own memory bank. Yeah, so whenever I believe that the AI starts hallucinating, I will ask, so that big user rule that I have has a section in it which tells the AI how to construct all of those files for me. So when I say build your memory bank, it'll do it for me. Yeah, so every time I need to rebuild the memory bank as well, I will tell it to do that at some stage. It's not quite as nice as an automated task management tool, kind of like Taskmaster, which is a little easier to use. But I find that it's one, human readable, and two, helps a lot more with my AI docs. I'll often even add a debugging log in there if I'm debugging something, and it helps a lot.
Yeah, so memory banking, oh, sorry.
Yeah,
Memory banking, you said that Zach,
Mr. Zach Smith, memory bank king, yes.
is that publicly available somewhere to look at that?
Yes, that is publicly available. And actually, my presentation has a link to a user rule that I created off of two years of. So I'll link that out. It'll probably be on my Twitter. You can pull it. Yeah, have fun. Yes.
As far as context management go, you said that you were manually adding in your human docs when you thought it was relevant. And then, so are you allowing the model or cursor or whatever to automatically select from the memory bank or from the docs folder where documentation is a human folder? How are they incorporated into the context management?
So it depends. If you're just starting an application, I generally link the folder and I allow it to select what it believes is most important. In that user rule, there is also a line allowing it to pull from the memory bank whenever it wants and update whatever file it wants whenever it wants to. If I'm debugging, I will be very specific about what files I feed it. And I just found that that allows it to keep on track. It'll often get distracted by either the previous message or whatever other files are in the folder. So if you're just starting discovery, you can pass it your folder and ask it to read it all in and ingest and summarize for you. But if you're debugging, I haven't had good experience with that. I hope that answered your question. Hi.
Hey, I have a question. Do you force yourself to only use AI, or do you edit things yourself?
Oh, that's a good question. So for the vast majority of Gauntlet, I only used AI. Nowadays, I do a little bit of both, but I would say 95% of it is AI-driven development. It depends. Sometimes it's easier to just go in myself and make the bug squash if it's a couple of lines or if I know exactly where it is. I wouldn't waste an agent call on that. But yeah.
So what would be your rule of thumb when you, so let's say you ask AI to generate your function, it generates it, but it's not correct. Do you just retry to regenerate it until it's correct?
Yes. Well, you can do a couple of things. You have to read the code, first of all. Thank you for reading the code. A lot of people don't, and that's why I encourage testing. But if it generates a function and it doesn't generate it the way you want it to, usually it's that you haven't given it the right context or you haven't told it the right thing to do. So either you can have it regenerate the function entirely, or you can use inline editing, where you highlight a portion of the function in Cursor, and if you press Command K, I think, it just changes that one part. So it depends on whatever is wrong with your method.
So it's heavily dependent on specific features within Cursor to be able to do AI-driven development?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, let me repeat the question. So the question was, if I recall, how often I use AI versus don't use AI, especially when it comes to writing functions that are incorrect, and then you said it's heavily context dependent on Cursor's tools, is that right? Yeah, so to answer the second question, I have found that Claude Code can do this as well. So if you want to rebuild, there's other tools outside of Cursor that can work for you. Git work trees are an example of that. So you can spin up your agent in a siloed Git environment and commit basically really pedantically, so that whenever it makes an error, you can backtrack right away. There's stuff like that. So you don't just need AI tools to do this. There are tools in Cursor that I like using for this.
So first off, Natalie, thanks for sharing your insight.
Of course.
And my question is, when you build your brain lists or your memory banks, or do you have an overarching memory bank that you use for all your projects, and then you kind of go deeper with each project, or do you rebuild it each time?
So the question was, do I rebuild my brain lifts or my memory banks every time I have a project, or do I have a template? And the answer is I rebuild them every time. And you have to. Well, at least for the scope of things that I'm doing, you really have to. If I'm very lucky and whatever app I'm building is an exact duplicate of what I've built before, then I can kind of get away with it. But I have found that I like tailoring what I do. I'm verbose and I'm picky. So it might work for other people. Other people, you might have a memory bank that you really like. But the memory bank, hello. Hello, hello. Mic trouble. Oh. Hello, hello. Okay, we're back. Yeah, the memory bank evolves over time. So as you're building, the AI agent will overwrite certain files. It will change information. It's kind of like short-term memory. So you've got long-term memory, which is kind of the documentation, and short-term memory, which is what you ate for breakfast. So I don't really think of a memory bank like a template that I bring around. Yeah.
We're going to do the last question.
Okay, last question.
Okay, for longer-term documentation, what's your approach to keeping it up to date when it grows?
Oh, great question. So the question was, what is my approach to keeping documentation up to date when it grows? Oh no. Hello. Hello, hello. Okay. It really depends. Some of the documentation will get outdated no matter what because it's human managed. I like to curate my documentation by topics, so I'll have subfolders that relate to either a component in the code or something that I'm working on, and whenever I need to update it, I will ask it to reference the memory bank and update the docs. So it's a little recursive, but that's an easy way to bring the short-term memory into the long-term. Sometimes I will re-index my entire code base, so that docs and indexing thing. Sometimes I'll just have it rerun and re-index the whole thing, and that immediately brings in any new methods into context. And then, worst case scenario, I just call and ask it to update all the documentation. Okay, that was the last question. Thank you, folks.
Good job.
Thanks. You're gonna do great.
I'm going to turn actually to the stream for a second. So I apologize to the audience. So the 40,000 people that are watching us on XM, I want to say apply.ai.com. It's going to be a part of this program. You can email us at support@confidence.com. We are here if you want to participate. Let's go back to our presenters. Presenting the next speaker, AJ Beckner. Let's give it up for AJ.
What's the is there a buzzer?
Oh, sorry.
Here you go. My bad. That's not my presentation. All right. Oh, let's see. All right. Hey, everybody. My name's AJ, and I'm here to talk to you guys about vibe coding. But I'm not here to give this presentation, actually. This is a totally different presentation that I gave about 6 months ago at an AI meetup in Argentina. It was titled The State of Vibe Coding. There was like a ton of slides, a whole bunch of different tips, when vibe coding was super new and Gauntlet was like really at the forefront of that revolution. But a lot has changed, and one of the things that has changed is actually people have soured a little bit on the term vibe coding, right? They're stuck on this idea of like, forget that the code even exists. And there's this idea that real engineers don't vibe code. They try to come up with other terms like power coding, or people coin all these different things, because real engineering, they must be doing something that's actually different from what those vibe coders are doing. But I don't really agree with that. I actually think the vibe coding approach can be good. So I'm kind of giving you the state of vibe coding Mark II. Everyone probably has seen this image, or perhaps even this tweet. This kind of coined a lot of the definitions around vibe coding. I talked about both of these in my first talk, but on the philosophy side, we have gotten at least one update, even though there's been much more updates on the technology side in AI first development in the last 6 months. And that update is this: The Way of Code, A Timeless Art of Vibe Coding. This is a book, for anyone who hasn't seen it, a book written about vibe coding by someone who is not an engineer and who became famous for making music despite he's not a musician. It's based on the Tao Te Ching, check it out. But what I want to take from this is that subtitle there, The Timeless Art of Vibe Coding. And this idea of timelessness. Because if what we're doing really makes sense, we want it to have a certain longevity beyond just using like the latest set of tools to accomplish something. So the question becomes, what actually is timeless? And the answer for me is this, right? This is the thing that's timeless about vibe coding. Long before, 6 months ago when it was coined, everyone here who's ever worked with GitHub in a repository as an engineer has probably seen a pull request or a code review that looks like this, right? Looks good to me. And I would just posit to you, to what extent is this person able to remember that the code exists or forget that the code exists, right? It's probably not at the forefront when they're approving a pull request this way. So if we engage with the reality of how development is done, long before LLMs were used, there is a timeless way of making technology happen, making software projects happen without necessarily being in the nitty-gritty of the code. And that's actually the key to vibe coding effectively in a way that you should as a real engineer. So why does this work? Why does somebody, like a tech leader, whoever that was, approving that pull request, why does it work for them to say, looks good to me, and like ship to production? Certainly this happens tens of thousands of times a day. Sometimes it causes issues. You find out about like problems at your workplace or elsewhere. But this happens a ton and does not cause issues. It actually works. And to me, the reason is that there is no first principles reason that code per se matters. And what I mean by that is that when you're evaluating software, you could evaluate the code. Engineers kind of default to evaluating the code. But actually, what you want to evaluate is the extrinsic properties of the software itself. And what I mean when I say extrinsic properties of the software, there's a few good examples, right? It's basically anything that is true in a black box when you're evaluating it. That includes things like correctness. Does it do what it wants? Security, whether or not it's vulnerable to certain kinds of attacks. And extensibility. Can it easily be modified and extended by a team over time? Bear with me. And so what you're actually evaluating is stuff like this, rather than the code per se. If you check off all these boxes, whether or not you like the code in your particular coding style is actually besides the point. So, like, where is code in this? Kind of the key to that when you're evaluating these extrinsic properties is they're all evaluations. You evaluate them in different ways. Evaluating correctness, you write your like unit tests, integration tests, and so on, to make sure that it's doing what it should. For security, you can do red teaming, you can audit it, different types of like scanning for viruses or vulnerabilities. And for extensibility, okay, that's actually our clue. That's where code comes in. Usually code quality is the de facto proxy measure for how extensible the system is, because it's the best metric we had for a while. But when going here, it's not exactly reviewing code quality. It's even using like proxies for that. And my contention is that I think those proxies actually still work in a vibe coding era and should be just as effective. So some of those factors include things like complexity. If something's low complexity, you need to give it less scrutiny when you're reviewing the pull request. There's a track record, so you know who the contributor of the pull request is, especially if you're on the small to medium-sized team. If they're a really strong developer and it's a very low complexity issue, you're not necessarily going to scrutinize it as heavily, if we're honest with ourselves as developers. And then there's also complicity, which meaning you're like complicit with it. So if you're pair programming and the person who wasn't driving is the one reviewing, or if you're a team lead and you talk to the person a lot about as they were going through the process of developing it, they were asking you questions, you were collaborating, you kind of know what's going on ahead of actually reviewing the pull request. So again, you can use that as like a proxy for looking directly at the code in all cases. And there's also other people's evaluations, because on medium to large size teams, as a team lead, if you're the only one like merging stuff in, you don't always have the time to review all the pull requests. Sometimes you're going to say, hey, senior engineer, what the junior just pushed in, like, is that any good? And you're going to ask them like questions. And based on their expert opinion, you may like make sure that it gets merged in without necessarily looking at the code. And this is true for better devs than I. Like better devs than I have merged things in this way, and they've also merged in, importantly, changes from people who are better devs than them. Because anyone who's managed a team knows, sometimes you are managing engineers that are actually better engineers than you, that are solving more complex issues than you would be solving in an individual contributor capacity in your code base. But you still need to be able to evaluate their work. That's true for humans, and that's true for AI. Like in the long term, you're going to have AI that's developing something, a more complex solution than what you'd be able to develop yourself. And the problem, the necessary problem of needing to evaluate it when you're shipping as like the human operator doesn't go away just because it's a human and not a principal engineer you've hired, right? So, coming back to these like heuristics you'd use, right? There's other people's evaluations, and in our case, in like an AI-first age, we also have not just people's evaluations, but LLM evaluations. You can talk to an LLM, maybe even a separate instance in like one of those like multiple agent windows in like your Cursor IDE, and ask it like, hey, some other LLM wrote this code. Is it any good? Do the tests pass? Can you get them to run? Are they bullshit tests, etc.? And that's what you do in an AI-first engineering context. It's actually also an AI-last engineering context. It's sort of this closed loop. You're using AI to plan, you're using AI to build, but then even before committing and shipping, you're using AI to also evaluate the work. So this is the full diagram that I presented on my first vibe coding talk. And the process hasn't changed like a ton. I still use LLMs for planning. We create documentation, like Natalie was talking about, run experiments on some of the tricky parts that we foresee ahead of time. Based on that, build an MVP, add different AI features, and ship. But now, if you're doing things of increasing complexity, you're also going to add in kind of an evaluation step that I've been describing. So not a ton of changes. The secret to this, for me, is one simple thing, which is that people say, don't anthropomorphize the AI. It's a terrible, bad thing that you shouldn't do. That's true when it was originally coined, because I think it was coined in the context of AI ethics, and you should not ascribe like moral value to decisions you made based on your discussion with GPT. But that's actually not true in like a practical context. In a practical context, like vibe coding, anthropomorphizing the AI is good, actually. Essentially, you can take this philosophy of like, what would you ask your coworker? A quick story when I was in Gauntlet is that the first few weeks were very hard. I was new to doing LLM-driven development, and I was trying a bunch of different approaches. Some worked better than others. It was during like Claude like 3.5 Sonnet like time, so it had the difficulties that came with that. And one of the experiments that I ran that I actually didn't think was going to go particularly well was I was like, I'll just treat it like I would treat a coworker. All the information that I would give a coworker that I'm delegating this task to, everything that would be in the Jira ticket, I'll give to it ahead of time instead of just saying, build X, like actually spec it out, and I'll see how that goes. And it went really well. And I was like, okay, I'll keep doing this until I encounter problems, and then I'll run the next experiment. Except that never actually happened. The more I started anthropomorphizing it, including treating it with different roles in different contexts, sometimes talking to it as a product manager that I'd be talking to, sometimes as a junior developer, sometimes as an architect, this always just continued to work. The favorite one from the time was treat it like a crack junior dev. That usually gets like quick results if you're trying to just like do something scrappy in a project. But the thing that I like about this approach is that it seems to be evergreen. Here, I'm borrowing a term, evergreen. It's used in different contexts, but the one I'm familiar with is SEO. And in SEO, they have kind of like black hat ways of doing things, white hat ways of doing things. And the common wisdom is that the white hat methods are evergreen, which is to say the search engine companies are going to try and plug any black hat methods that are working today eventually. But the evergreen ones are aligned with like the actual vision of what they want you to be doing in order to get your content ranked highly in the future. And so if you do it now, it's more likely to work for a much longer stretch of time because it's aligned with their incentives. That's how this works. But also, something you might notice is another way of saying evergreen is timeless, which we were talking about earlier. So in terms of actually doing this, right, there's a very simple approach that I think works for projects of a decent amount of scale. It's basically what's going on here, right, which is you're asking questions. We know exactly what's happening in this guy's thought bubble when he types, looks good to me. He's wondering a few things, like, are there tests? Do they pass? Are the tests bullshit? That's the kind of stuff you'd be asking anyone else working with you on reviewing different team members' code. You can also work this up to more complex approaches, including things like writing an AI test harness. So instead of having just like unit tests, you'll have like an LLM as a judge that can actually run through some of these types of evaluations and questions after the fact. I think that for most like small to medium-sized projects, that's not particularly necessary. When you're in like huge code bases, complex code bases, or legacy code bases, this becomes more important. Or in particular, if you need everyone to be doing these checks in the exact same way, that's also when you want it to be I haven't actually used, with the exception of one project, an AI test harness approach. But the thing that excites me about that approach is that it really highlights this other idea I have, which is that there are a lot of objections to vibe coding and to using like LLM-driven development. People, even when they're excited about it, often have specific pet objections about why it can't be used in certain parts of their projects or their particular industry, et cetera. But for most of these, the thing that I say is that it's actually an engineering problem to be solved. All those objections are things that are going to be solved in the next like 5 to 10 years. It's just a matter of figuring out how to structure like evals and all of your quality controls on the extrinsic properties of your software around those things. Because if you can guarantee the correctness, security, and extensibility, and so on, even for things where there's like PII or like healthcare coding, they're just going to need stricter controls. It's the same thing that is true today or prior to vibe coding for like security, right? Those industries need better security, but they don't not get the benefits that the rest of the software industry does. So thank you. I'm going to break for, this is the Q&A point. And in particular, I didn't talk that much about the technical stuff. So if you want to ask about any of the philosophy that I just talked about around vibe coding or my particular workflow, I'm glad to talk about that with you all. Kale.
Yeah, when you are working with like a new chat and assigning a particular persona, how strict are you about that? Like, do you have complete separation of concerns with like your senior dev or your reviewer, your PR reviewer?
Yes. So the question is, when I'm working with different chats with different roles, how strict am I about assigning a persona to it? And this is interesting because I had 2 conversations about this. One with a friend of mine who is not an engineer, but uses LLMs a ton. And in that conversation, I was actually surprised to find out that they do this a lot. They assign specific roles and use kind of like the old school act as X, I'm in this situation, here's like the rest of the big prompt. And I found out, I kind of stopped doing that around the like Claude 4 era of the Anthropic models. What I also found though is that that's not true for all engineers, and I see that it seems to have diverged for Cursor users and Anthropic Claude Code users, because Claude Code has like the sub-agents thing where it's very easy to like define like a fleshed out role, but it's also like I think a little bit more necessary in that context. I found that Claude and Cursor together is like a really good generalist, and even just with like the prompt that I send, it kind of inherently understands the role assigned to it, or at least the way that I describe my prompts in a coding context. I also suspect that engineering and product management activities are like more sensitive to when you start using that language, they'll hop into that role even if you didn't necessarily tell them to. Whereas if I ask it to like do something about like my taxes, I might need to like, you know, tell it to act like an accountant or something. Other questions?
What specific areas, so you're kind of talking about how whenever somebody puts in like forecast, you're like, okay, cool, I trust you with this versus that. What specific areas do you find yourself having to step in and fix a lot more than other areas when it comes to working with AI?
Okay, so the question was, of all the different things I'm doing in like a coding project, what is the area or areas that I find myself stepping in more to course correct it? I do a lot of web development work. I think my answer might be different if I worked with like languages that are not TypeScript and Python, et cetera, more. But in like a web dev context, the biggest problems are still like in infra. It's like a lot less familiar generally with like a lot of infra things. However, instead of actually assigning it a role, you've just unlocked the bonus slides because I anticipated a question along these lines. Originally, especially during my time in Gauntlet, doing infra with LLMs was hard. But especially if you're in AWS, there are technologies that let you do Vibe DevOps. And my favorite one of these is SST. SST.dev is infrastructure as code in TypeScript. Keyword there being TypeScript. It's very well maintained, very well documented. And it basically helps like Claude and Cursor specifically like understand AWS really well and set up your IAC. So to troubleshoot what you're describing, the other thing that I do, and you can see it in that graph that I had earlier, is that I separate out, I think of the stack and the actual application as two application, around, I'll plan the thing ahead of time. But then we'll do one whole project around using like SST to like Vibe DevOps, set up my stack. I'll like actually push into the cloud and have like a working website with like auth and database and stuff before I even think about asking about any like features for like the actual application itself, which if you think about it, that's basically where you start if you're coming from like Replit or like Lovable, right? So in the context where I'm not on Replit or Lovable, I just build that for myself in the stack of my choice, often using SST, which, you know, TypeScript stuff happens in AWS. And then once I'm done with that, I will like commit it, maybe even like fork the repo as like a template, and then begin the project from there, which has been very powerful and transformative. That's one of the things that I think is a major development since the last time I was talking about vibe coding. Yes?
Most of the time, the AI features versus non-AI features, like how do you differentiate when you're doing a code wiping from like coding on developing the non-AI features versus the AI features?
Yeah, that's a good question. So this is another area that has changed a bit. When I first gave the talk, it was very much in a context where I was in the habit of building out a project, often like a clone or competing service with some existing SaaS product, and then adding AI features to it afterwards. That kind of product development workflow was the main reason that it's like separated in that like workflow diagram. As time has progressed, I'm working at an AI forward company now. Our product like heavily uses AI in like all the different parts of the stack. And so because it's not something where AI is like being added into like an existing category of product, that actually gets like blended together. In fact, sometimes the like troubleshooting or experiments that I'm running in the beginning is actually the AI part. Like I'm building, I don't know, like maybe a, hello, okay. Maybe like a RAG pipeline or like some other thing first, making sure that the AI part works, and then actually building the product around it instead.
Do you use different models for different personas? So like you're doing Opus for review and Sonnet or Codex and whatnot for coding? Yeah,
the question is, do I use different models, Opus, Sonnet, GPT, Grok, etc., for different roles when I'm coding? Yes and no. Kind of how it checks out isn't necessarily the roles. What actually ends up being the case is that I basically universally use Claude Opus for everything if I'm inside Cursor. And then if I'm in like a browser having a conversation with an LLM where I'm doing anything other than coding, although this includes architecture and planning sometimes, I'll use Grok for everything outside of Cursor. The reason there is that I really like the improvements in Grok 4, but specifically I find that Grok 4 has like the best like deep research functionality. Some of the other deep research projects are very good, but they're really tailored towards you're either talking to it normally or it's going to give you like a 20-page paper. Grok 4's search capabilities is much better. It kind of more views it as a continuum and will give you like the right amount of research and granularity based on what you've asked it, which I find expedient and powerful. All right, thank you guys. Lastly, if you want to get in touch with me, my handle is thisistheaj. I own that as a .com. You can find me there, the same handle on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, anywhere that I have social media. And if you're local to Austin, which everyone here is, me and one of the other super builders run a AI X education meetup, the next one of which is happening next Tuesday. So if you're interested in revolutionizing education like we're doing at Gauntlet, and or AI, doesn't have to be both, definitely come check that out, y'all. Thank you.
All right, everybody go follow AJ. This is the AJ.
And thank you to our viewers online.
Let's give it up for AJ, everybody. All right, before I introduce our next speaker, I did want to share some news. I just sent out the first 15 acceptances for Gauntlet AI Cohort 3. So congratulations to a couple of acceptances in the crowd and a couple of acceptances in our live stream watching right now. So let's give it up for Gauntlet AI Cohort 3. And if you're looking to apply, the 50,000 of you watching us right now, apply.gauntletai.com. If you're looking to apply and join Cohort 3, we'll have a hardware lab, we'll make better projects, and we're going to revive a company. Apply.gauntletai.com. All right, for our final speaker, I'd like to introduce Patrick Skinner.
There we go. Hey everyone, how's it going? I'm super excited to be here, guys, because I mean, there's so many cool things to learn. And I think one thing that's really interesting is like, by the end of this, you're gonna see that many of us kind of talked about the same things, but wildly different ways to solve what could very well be the same problems. In a way, there's this time where like you could look at a LeetCode code problem and you could say, okay, there's like 50 different ways to solve this in some cases. And that's exactly the same thing when it comes to any type of agentic coding. Now, before I get into talking about like command line, I do want to actually touch on a few things about my experience with Gauntlet. So my background is I'm formerly a senior developer relations engineer. My entire job is to try to stay on the cutting edge of education and what's coming out, and then try to distribute that as quickly as possible. And so like my entire job was trying to learn fast, and then learn to a scale that I can honestly just be able to teach it really, really quickly. And I would have to say, I thought I was pretty impressive when it came to agentic coding, that I could, get into Cursor. I knew how to do proper, prompting. I understood how to set up Cursor rules and things like that. And then I got into Gauntlet, and it was roughly about, actually I would say like the first week physically here, I realized, holy shit, I'm not learning fast enough. Like this is already completely outpacing me at home. And now I'm in this room or this building here with 60, 70 other individuals. And the rate at which we are iterating information and then passing it to each other was beyond anything I could compare to. We had some people that were, hardcore into using Cursor. We had people using AMP. We had people using just GPT-5. We had people just getting into Claude Code. Claude Code was probably the champion during Gauntlet Cohort 2. And then we had people running full-on like Claude Swarms and Hive Minds and all kinds of stuff like that. If you've ever seen any of the videos or anything like that of me teaching, I've talked a lot about Hive Minds and Swarms in the past. So, but I'm not going to get too much into that. I am actually going to get into something that I think is significantly more important, is how to properly do CLI-based agentic coding, and then at its most, properly planning for it. So let me get into this now. I think I have a little scroll problem here. Okay, we can see this correctly, right? All right. So a little bit about a little extra information about me is I'm a former military guy. I get a little hardcore at times, and so I do like some of these hardcore quotes. And one of the things that I really lean on is quotes like this: is if you ever find yourself in a fair fight, am I loud enough? Okay, here we go. Yeah. If you ever find yourself in a fair fight, you didn't plan accordingly. And so I'm always trying to plan for everything. I plan for everything when it comes to what I'm about to code. I plan for all the videos and anything like that that I create. I try to plan for teaching opportunities and things like that. I try to plan for everything, because anything that comes unplanned is honestly a risk. And that's exactly the same thing when it comes to agentic coding. If you didn't properly plan for any type of agentic coding, whether it's in Cursor or whether it's in a CLI tool or anything like that, then you are going to have issues, okay? So jumping into that, I just want to talk about research. And like, this is just how I start research and how I take an idea and then turn it into something that I'm actually going to create. So step one, Perplexity. I promise I'm not paid, but I do like this sweater. This is a nice sweater. Yeah, and this is not paid marketing or anything. But Perplexity is a great way where I can take this aha moment of an idea and be able to say, okay, does this idea already exist? And does it already have product market fit? Because as soon as I search for an idea, the top things that are going to come out of Perplexity are the things that are already probably being used, okay? So that's an idea, an existing idea with product market fit. Okay, now the next part is Manus. I am a massive Manus fan, because not only just because of the tools for deep and wide research, but its output and how well it articulates information is there's not a single tool that's even close to Manus. So step one, I try to see, are there products and do they have product market fit? Step two is why? Why does this product not exist? I want to study the market. I want to study the product itself. Is it too hard to build? Is it so easy that it's been built too many times, and then there's just a million versions of that, and you're just not really finding a sole winner? There's all kinds of different things that I really want to look for when I'm trying to do, pick a product. Because there's a lot of times where you may find out, okay, there are no products like out there. So then a lot of people will stop at step one and then say, okay, it doesn't exist. I'm going to be the first one to build it. But if you don't do step two, you may not realize that nobody wants that damn product. That's a very truthful statement where there are so many people building so many different things. I'm from crypto, so I know there's a lot of product out there that nobody actually wants. And so the reality of the situation is maybe the reason why there's nothing out there that exists is because nobody wants the thing, or maybe it doesn't necessarily fit the market that you may be thinking that would be the perfect target market for it. And then last, Grok. Why would I use Grok after doing all the market research? Shouldn't I have all the information out there? Last thing is potential competitors, because if there is no product market fit and there is a market for it, I want to look for people that are currently building it and haven't finished yet. Because we're engineers, we love to boast about the shit we haven't finished building yet. And it's all over X. Oh, check out this new thing that I'm building. Here's a really quick demo. Not quite done yet, roadmap 2, 3, 4 weeks, whatever, okay? I want to see what's already out there and see what people are already building, because a couple things that it'll show me is, one, based on the fact that I've done a lot of market research, maybe I realize, oh, they're building it, but they're building on the wrong platform. The users that they're building for like to use iPads, and they're doing it on Next.js or something like that. So there's a lot of different opportunities you can find in doing these 3 critical steps. So again, Perplexity, find out if the product that you're thinking about exists and has product market fit. Step 2 is find out why. Why does it have product market fit, or why is there an open market for it, or does that open market not even exist for the product that you're potentially looking for? I work with the super builders, and we do talk about TAMs a lot. So that's one thing you do want to fully understand is there a market? Is there like over $1 billion market for you to actually build this product for? Or is there really not that large of a market for it, and that's why nobody's building it? So that's why I like to really dive into research first. But then we can enhance. By the way, who here doesn't recognize this meme? Okay, there's a couple people. All right, that makes me so sad, because I showed somebody that I work with this meme, and the fact that they don't know that, I was like, oh God, how freaking old have I gotten? And so anyways, Super Troopers meme. What I want to do is I want to get into like an enhanced research, but I want to make it so that I have an AI that is poking holes in what I'm trying to build. I want to see if this thing can really dive in and ask me questions that I myself haven't asked the AI, to really delve into either the market or the product that I want to build or the potential competitors. Now, this is called BMAD. So the BMAD method, basically in short, it's just short for Breakthrough Method for Agile AI-Driven Development. So anybody that's been watching Austin's tweets, he's been talking a lot about like, oh, Agile's dead, or it's going to be dead. No, I just think it's ascended to this whole AI level thing. But you've got to really be able to coordinate it in a way that it actually works for you. Okay, basically all it is modern coding approach that combines agile software development principles with AI agentic automation. So the idea here is to be able to actually take a lot of the agile principles of having an analyst, having a product manager, a scrum master, developer, QA tester, doing all the planning, doing all the coding, and then also testing, which I heard earlier, Natalie really hitting hard on test your code. And to be honest, that's probably one of the big moats right now for AI, is a lot of AI doesn't fully understand how to test code. And so what you have to do is you have to make sure that your AI is very, very well tailored for testing, okay? So this is an entire framework that actually helps you a lot with that. So a couple features that we had in having this BMAD method is that you can take a very, very large PRD. So you've done all your research, you've done your planning, you've written your PRD. Now your PRD is like 500, 600, 1,000 lines long in an MD file or a TXT file. It's sitting in the at the base of your repo, and you hope that the AI that you're coding with can iterate through this huge file and be able to get all the context needed in order to be able to execute on the task. Well, one of the things you need to be able to do after doing all the research and planning is you want to make sure you do task sharding. So this is something that actually happens in the BMAD method, where it actually break down a full PRD and actually ask hundreds of questions, if you allow it to, back to you, trying to fill in the potential gaps of your PRD, okay? And then you're gonna end up with a PRD that may have started off at like 500 lines. Now it's gonna be anywhere from like 2 to even 5,000 lines, but then it's gonna get sharded into individual files. So that way you can actually feed in sections of your PRD into the AI, understand the context of what you're trying to execute on without over contextualizing on any of your tasks. Okay, so then next thing is a part of the BMAD method is you want that automated documentation process. There's a really good question earlier about how documentation can get so big that it just kind of like expands too far for the AI to contextualize. And one of the things I really like to do in this case is I will literally spin up some sort of documentation template and then actually reset my documentation in there so that actually works exactly how typical documentation works. So I'll have all the pages and navigation and everything set up so that it fully understands how certain pages connect to others. All right, and that's part of like a trick that I use from the developer relations kind of approach. All right, so what you end up having is like, what we're gonna talk about is how do we have BMAD specifically work inside of Claude and inside of like this project here. How can I set this up so that the BMAD method works very, very well for me? So let me actually pull up a fully working example here. So for those that are really, really interested in this, there's a repo called BMAD at Claude, okay? So this is actually fully built for Claude, and you can actually inject it directly into Claude, and then it'll actually do all the tasking that you need it to do as long as you're managing and answering questions along the way. Okay, so I took this and I have this basic PRD. This PRD is interesting because this is the original PRD that I used to build a satellite tasking MCP server that tasked out satellites to take images at certain locations at certain times. And this PRD itself, I actually threw a Claude Swarm at it and did a bunch of planning. The whole planning process took me about 6 hours. Now the coding part, because I used a 16 agent swarm where each, a hive mind, where I had 4 agents per swarm, and then I had a hive mind orchestrated that managed all 4 of the swarms. The final process took right about 48, so it's like 16 minutes for architecture, 36 minutes for the actual coding, and then about 2 hours for just debugging. And in that time, I was able to actually have a fully working MCP server that used natural language to task out satellites. And I actually have a few people that were part of that project here and actually got to watch me task out a satellite that took a picture of this actual building. So it's really, really cool. Never thought I could actually do something like that in the span of a single day. But that, I mean, that's where we are. Because I just remember, like, before all this, I was like, oh, I'm going to build a starter kit, using Cursor, and that's going to take me like a week. But then I'm turning around, I'm building MCP servers and talking to satellites in a day. So, I mean, this is the level of stuff that you can do when you really get deep into this stuff. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to spin up Claude. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to just take this orchestrator here, and I'm going to copy it. And then I'm going to paste this here so that it actually gives the full prompt in here for how the orchestrator agent works. Okay, and let's see. Follow this context prompt. Sorry, I'm typing with one hand holding a microphone. It's a terrible idea. It's not for the faint of heart. So it's beep booping now, I guess. Beep bopping, yeah. And what it's going to basically do is it's going to assume basically the role of this orchestrator agent. And then next, it's going to give me a list of execution prompts that I can use. And then I can basically use these execution prompts to turn it into the analyst, the business analyst, the marketing person, the QA tester, anything like that. And what that's going to do is it's going to ask me hundreds of questions, if I allow it to give me more and more and more context on the project that I'm building on. Because I myself, even though I used AI, I myself wrote the PRD, right? But I've never gone through back and forth with an AI or anybody else to give and test and poke holes in this idea that I've got. And so in this case, it's going to go ahead and just assume that position simply by saying, I'm going to just use this command here. I'm going to say star brainstorm. And let's see what it does. Of course, you know, lots of times you have what's called, I don't have the command available. I love that happens on live feed because it's worked every single time otherwise. But it may search for the term and then assume the actual position of the analyst. When it assumes the position of the analyst, it's going to go through my PRD and just ask questions on this. Why would we do this instead of this? And then it's going to continue to fill in those gaps in my PRD. That's one of the biggest and most important things when it comes to any type of agentic coding is you want to make sure that you don't have any holes and leave any type of context where the AI itself has to fill in that context. Because the moment it has to assume something is the moment that things really go awry. Okay, so you always want to make sure that you are delivering as much context as humanly possible, and it doesn't need to fill in the gaps in any place. So, oh, actually, did it work? And I was looking away. Sorry, one sec. Let's see. Okay, so it didn't actually go into the full, so it did find the agent analyst in which I can type in now star agent analyst. All right, let's see how this goes. Again, I love when live streams go on and then like it just doesn't work. This is that, you know, I can almost compare myself to Zuckerberg right now, but it's probably not, I'm not that big, obviously. So give it a second, let's see if it goes into, okay, transforming into business analyst. Let's see if it works. Please work. This is the slowest I've ever seen Claude move. Yeah. As we go into this, it's gonna give itself a name. It's going to assume this position of okay, there we go. As your business analyst, I can help with this. And one of the things that it's going to do is going to help you do market research. It's just going to continue to poke holes into it. And then what ends up happening after you've gone through the business analyst, you've gone through your Scrum Master, you've gone through every single agent, through the planning process, it's going to end up looking something like this. So I've got this one PRD, but then in a finished product, you're going to have about 11 different documents here of the architecture, and then you're going to have roughly about anywhere 7, 8, 9, 10 documents for the PRD itself. You're going to have stories from the Scrum Master. You're going to have a lot of different things that are going to help you be able to contextualize what you start building on. And then you can continue on with the coding agent through Beemaster, through Claude, and it's going to be able to continue to do documentation and everything for you, depending on what steps you are. It's going to be able to use a SQLite database for managing tasks and everything like that. It will flatten all of your code so that it's easier for the AI to be able to ingest and so on. So these are some of the steps that I highly, highly, highly recommend using, because one of the things that a lot of people do right away is I'm just going to jump in a cursor. I'm going to give it an idea. We're going to code it out, and we're just going to debug through the process. The more you can mitigate for bugs, the better and the higher likelihood you're going to have a better end product. Okay? Let's see. And that's it, guys. I'm going to go ahead and hand it back to you guys for questions or anything like that. Let's go ahead.
I know you're doing extensive research and doing the planning.
Yeah.
LLMs by nature, they do hallucination a lot.
Yes.
Right. So have you ever, what is the percentage of getting that hallucination planning versus like, let the LLM do the job, giving the idea of our time?
So so you're asking me, and I just want to make sure I'm understanding your question. When I'm doing we're in the research phase, okay, and you're trying to understand during the research phase the outcome of what's coming back to you.
Yeah.
Okay, and maybe I'm not fully understanding you. Can you give it back to me?
Talking about the hallucination itself, so how much authentic that you really wanted to check or cross-check with different tooling again and making sure that it is right.
Yeah, that's a great question. So a lot of it, when it starts asking you questions, I think this is the part that's like really important is during let's say the analyst phase, it starts asking those questions. And there are a lot of questions it asks you that I myself don't even know the answer to. It's like, okay, it's asking specifically like, which framework are we going to use for this one? And I may not fully understand why I would use one framework versus the other. So I will go literally all the way back to the original research of Perplexity to Manus to Grok to understand, okay, what is the best framework specifically for this? And why would I choose Vite versus Next versus something for iPad versus mobile, React Native, anything like that. And so, I just pressed that button, my bad. So I will always almost kick back to the original research when I get to that portion where the Claude business analyst is asking me specific questions. And there's times where I will spend an entire day trying to answer those questions simply because I want to make sure that I myself fully understand the questions that are being asked and the answers I'm giving. So I would also argue that this method itself allows me to continue to learn faster than pretty much anybody else because I'm getting all of these crazy questions. I'm doing significant amount of research and I'm being able to iterate on a lot of these questions a lot faster than if I were to just jump into Cursor, start building something, and then spend more time debugging. I'm spending more time researching and learning than I am actually debugging. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Just to follow up.
Go ahead.
Do you cross-check the same PRD with multiple LLMs?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So do you cross-check the PRD with multiple LLMs? Yes, I will cross-check a lot of the information. Not the, I will not cross-check the sharding. After it's been sharded, I won't cross-check that because I will get like a final template and I'll cross-check a lot of that information, but I won't cross-check sharding because sharding is when it's been pretty much broken down so that that it's ready for agentic coding. Does that answer your question? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, so that's a great question. Modifications to the agents themselves. Well, BMAD does that in a sense where it will utilize like the flattening tool. So let me actually show that because I do have that open. At the very bottom, this was actually recently added. So we have here this code-based flattener tool where the BMAD method includes a powerful code-based flattener tool designed to prepare your project files for AI model consumption. So one of the things that you want to make sure that you're doing is you're using your context window properly. So it'll actually break down sub-agents so that it fully understands how to flatten the code and then be able to flatten the code in separate parts, just like sharding in a sense, and then be able to ingest that from the to the orchestrator agent. So that's one way of like modifying and using sub-agents and things like that effectively. So that way you don't end up with a ton of hallucination issues. Go ahead.
And one follow-up to that, did you find ever instances where you lost from session to session or like step to step that you lost context again when you build it yourself?
That is a painful situation. Yeah. So going from session to session. So the question is, have you ever lost context going from like session to session? Yes. And it is absolutely painful. That's why you want to be able to use features like AI-based SQLite databases that will continue to store context over time. So that way it can be re-fed back in if a session crashes for some reason, and for some reason, let's say your computer crashes, you shut it down, you forget to close out or store something correctly, and then you have to restart the thing all over again. That is a painful experience that I've had several times. So any type of SQLite databases or anything like that that can really help you manage your context is crucial.
Yeah, question is, as I've seen the pattern of having really, really well-scoped PRDs are great to make the whole job easier when you don't have drift and like scope and I'm curious, like just like in the actual experience of working for companies and creating enterprise software, how often are you running into, oh wow, like we scoped the PRD, but now actually things have changed, and like adjusting to that change, what's been your experience? How do models kind of handle that like scope increase? And
yeah.
So you're kind of doing classic like feature rollouts with GitHub, okay, or let's like make it, you know, how has that been, how do models handle that kind of?
Yeah, this is a great question because there's two answers to it. One, first the question is, you know, you've got this really well scoped PRD and you've already started the agentic coding process, and then suddenly the scope has changed to some degree. Either you're no longer going to be using these specific features, or we're no longer going to be delivering on this, we're delivering on that. How do you make those changes? So the nice thing is, because there is this documentation iteration process that happens, even in the flattening phase, you can actually have it go back to the business analyst. You can go back to the documenter or any of those agents and basically say, hey, scope has changed. Here's some updates to the scope. How do we update our documentation for that? And it will do that for you. That's one. Now, two is, if you ever have that situation where you're like, oh, hey, you know, I'm working through it, and not necessarily in the business, the scope has changed, but maybe the scope is changing for you because you're hitting these errors over and over again, and the AI decides this is no longer the way, we should do it this way. That's because you didn't properly set up the PRD. You think you've got a scoped PRD, but then you may have not researched that, oh, wait a minute, this package is not compatible with this package. When we scoped it, we did the research, we felt that these were the best items for this task, but then we ended up finding out that those two items are not compatible. Has anybody ever ran into that, where like, oh, I scoped out this PRD, and then suddenly throughout the process, oh, this package isn't currently compatible, or this package is now deprecated? That's because during that PRD development phase, you didn't actually properly research everything. And so that's why going through this and researching it as deeply as possible is really, really crucial, so you're not days into this and find out that some of the crucial components of what you're developing aren't even compatible. Does that answer your question? Okay, cool. Yeah, last one.
Is there any way to apply this method for different systems like ChatGPT, or is only for cloud?
Yes.
I'm very sure cloud hallucinate a lot, and if you use long document like those BRD, it's gonna forget everything.
Well, that's what the SQL database is for, for context continuity, is so that way, depending on what phase you're in, it will actually go back to certain portions of context within that SQL database. So for some reason, if you got to switch back to that business analyst agent, it will actually find information in that SQL database that is attributed specifically for the business analyst, so it doesn't hallucinate in the process. So I'm not too worried about that part, but yes, to your question, the original question is, can you use the BMAD method in other models? Absolutely. If you actually look up the BMAD method, the original BMAD method is agent agnostic, and so you can actually use that across several different CLI tools. So yeah, absolutely. So, and that's it, guys. I really appreciate you guys attending.
I'll just hold it. Just holding both mics. Fine. All right. Hopefully that works. Awesome. Thank you so much to the 3 champions who came. Wanted to shout them out and make sure you can follow them on X, and to all the people that are watching live. Natalie was our first presenter. She is at NMM Software on X. AJ is This Is the AJ on X. And Patrick is P Skinner Tech. And Gauntlet is Join Gauntlet AI. So we wanted to thank everybody for coming out tonight. We're gonna have some food and drinks and time to hang out and chat. If you're watching online, please apply to Gauntlet AI. We're in the process of making decisions and sending out acceptances and denials as we, actually Ash was literally doing it as the live stream was going. So check your inboxes if you're curious. But regardless, thank you all for coming tonight or for viewing tonight if you're online. We're thinking we're gonna do this somewhat periodically. I'm not sure exactly how often. Might be once a month, might be once every couple of weeks, but we're excited to have you all here. And if you're interested in Gauntlet, please apply to Gauntlet AI and we'll see you all around. Thank you.